First contact with fear. The crystalline spires of the Vextal research vessel, luminous inquiry, glittered against the backdrop of deep space, its transparent hull refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. Chief researcher Ixel watched through multiple compound eyes as another simulation failed, the holographic display dissolving into a scatter of useless data points. The situation was beyond critical. Honored Chief, Sub-researcher Ven's voice vibrated through the ship's resonance channels, their crystalline form clouded with distress. The pathogen has breached containment level 6. It's consuming the ship's outer matrix. Ixel shifted their crystalline segments, a gesture of deep concern among the Vextal. They had encountered many strange phenomena during their centuries of deep space research, but nothing like this. The pathogen, if it could even be called that, was systematically devouring their ship's living crystal structure, converting it into something else entirely. The luminous inquiry wasn't just a vessel, it was the pride of the Vextal Scientific Coalition, a masterpiece of crystalline biotechnology that had taken decades to grow. Its neural pathways contained the accumulated knowledge of thousands of years of peaceful exploration. And now, it was being consumed by a microscopic horror that defied their understanding of biology itself. "Show me the latest analysis," Ixel commanded, their usual melodic tones sharp with urgency. The holographic display shifted, revealing microscopic imagery of the pathogen's work. What they saw made their crystalline core vibrate with dread. The pathogen wasn't simply destroying the ship's matrix. It was reorganizing it, creating new structures that pulsed with an alien energy signature. Their most sophisticated containment protocols, developed over millennia of peaceful scientific advancement, had proved worse than useless. Each attempt to neutralize the threat had only accelerated its evolution. "We've lost contact with the Eternal Seeker," announced First Navigator Zin, referring to their sister ship. Their last transmission indicated total crystal failure in their central core. They'd gone dark. Ixel's segments clouded completely, a sign of profound distress. The Eternal Seeker had been their backup, maintaining a safe distance to study the pathogen's spread and work on countermeasures. If it had fallen, "The pathogen is accelerating its reproductive cycle," Ven reported, their voice frequencies trembling. "At current progression rates, we have less than 30 standard cycles before total system failure. We're running out of options, Honored Chief." Ixel moved to the ship's crystal heart, where the primary research chamber pulsed with the combined consciousness of their best minds. The gathered scientists fell silent as their leader approached, their own crystalline forms dulled with exhaustion and fear. "We've tried everything in our database," said senior researcher Lix. "Every known sterilization protocol, every form of energy weapon, every frequency of radiation. Nothing works. It just adapts, evolves, grows stronger." Ixel processed this information through all their neural facets. Their civilization had achieved what many would consider perfection. Their crystalline technology was self-repairing. Their scientific methods were precise and foolproof. Their society was peaceful and orderly. But perhaps that was the problem. "There is one option we haven't considered," came a quiet resonance from the back of the chamber. All attention turned to junior researcher Kex, whose smaller form seemed to shrink under the sudden scrutiny. "Speak," Ixel encouraged, their tones gentle despite the crisis. "During my studies of primitive worlds, I encountered records of a species that evolved in conditions we would consider impossible." Kex's voice grew stronger as they continued. "Their homeworld is a nightmare of environmental extremes, toxic substances, and aggressive microscopic life forms. They call it Earth." A collective shudder passed through the assembled scientists. Deathworlders, humans. Their entire evolutionary history is a story of survival against impossible odds, Kex continued. They don't just survive hostile microorganisms. They've learned to understand them, manipulate them, even use them for their benefit. Their bodies are filled with billions of microscopic life forms that they've formed symbiotic relationships with. You're suggesting we contact a human. Lick's tones were sharp with disbelief. Their methods are chaos incarnate. They break every protocol of safe scientific practice. Perhaps, Ixel interjected, their segments shifting in a pattern of deep thought. That is exactly what we need. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of conflicting frequencies. Ixel raised their primary segment for silence, and the chaos subsided. Look at our situation objectively, they resonated. Our perfect protocols have failed. Our orderly methods have been turned against us. We face an entity that thrives on chaos and adaptation, qualities that humans have mastered over millions of years of evolution. Through the chamber's transparent walls, they could see the spreading corruption of the pathogen, its alien patterns crawling across their beautiful crystalline, hull-like cracks in reality itself. They were a species that had achieved mastery through order and control. But sometimes, Ixel reflected, the only way to fight chaos was with chaos itself. Make the call, they commanded. Find us a human specialist, one who understands the darkest, most aggressive forms of microscopic life. We need someone who has looked into the abyss of biological warfare and learned to dance with its horrors. As their crew rushed to comply, Ixel gazed out at the infected sections of their ship. For the first time in their long existence, they found themselves hoping for a solution that defied their understanding of proper scientific procedure. Sometimes, they reflected, survival required embracing the very chaos they had spent millennia trying to eliminate. They just hoped their ship would survive long enough for help to arrive. The human solution. Dr. Eleanor L. Blackwood was elbow-deep in a containment chamber filled with what most people would consider a nightmare when the call came. The black, writhing mass of experimental bacteria she was cultivating had already eaten through 3 different types of supposedly indestructible materials. She was grinning. Dr. Blackwood, her lab assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. There's an unusual transmission coming through. They say they're from something called the Vextal Scientific Coalition. Elle's eyes lit up. First contact with a new alien species would normally be handled through proper diplomatic channels, not directed to a somewhat notorious bacterial warfare defense specialist working in a hidden lab in the Arctic. This had to be interesting. Put them through to my helmet display, she said, carefully extracting her hands from the containment chamber. The bacteria could wait. They were just getting to the fun part anyway. The image that appeared in her heads-up display was unlike anything she'd seen before. The alien was essentially a complex arrangement of transparent crystals that shifted and realigned as it spoke, its voice a strange harmonic that her translation software struggled to process. Dr. Eleanor Blackwood. The crystalline beam resonated. I am Chief Researcher Ixel of the Vextal. We face a crisis that our science cannot solve. We require unusual expertise. Elle listened as Ixel explained their situation, her smile growing wider with each detail. By the time they finished describing the pathogen's adaptive capabilities, she was practically bouncing with excitement. Let me get this straight, she said, already starting to pack her specialized equipment. You've got a space-borne superbug that eats living crystal, adapts to energy weapons, and gets stronger every time you try to kill it. And it's threatening to destroy your entire fleet. She paused for effect. That sounds amazing. When can I start? There was a distinct pause from the alien end of the transmission. Your enthusiasm for potential catastrophe is concerning, Ixel noted. Oh, don't worry about that, Elle replied, tossing another case of what most safety boards would classify as extremely dangerous substances into her bag. It's not the catastrophe I'm excited about, it's the challenge. You've got a perfect storm of adaptation and survival going on up there. This could revolutionize our understanding of extremophile evolution. 6 hours later, Elle's shuttle was docking with the luminous inquiry. She stepped out wearing what looked like a heavily modified hazmat suit, though several sections had been replaced with materials that made the Vextal scientists' crystalline segments cloud with concern. Is that protection adequate? Sub-researcher Venn asked, noting the numerous patches and seemingly haphazard modifications to the suit. This? Elle knocked on her helmet. It's better than adequate. I've modified it based on my work with about 30 different types of flesh-eating bacteria. The patches are from all the times I figured out something didn't work. Learning through failure, it's the human way. The gathered scientists exchanged worried glances, their crystalline forms reflecting the emergency lighting in increasingly erratic patterns. This human seemed to take an almost perverse pride in her suit's obvious battle damage, as if surviving multiple containment failures was something to celebrate rather than a sign of flawed methodology. The pathogen has now consumed approximately 30% of our outer hull, senior researcher Lix reported, trying to steer the conversation back to proper scientific discourse. Our models predict total system failure within. Yeah, forget the models. Elle interrupted, already pulling out an array of equipment that looked more cobbled together than professionally manufactured. From what you've told me, this thing adapts faster than any predictive model could keep up with. We need to think like it does. React, adapt, evolve our approach in real time. She approached the nearest infected section of hull, pressing various sensors against the crystalline surface. The instruments she used seemed to be hybrid creations, combining different technologies in ways their original manufacturers had definitely not intended. Fascinating, she exclaimed, examining the readings. It's not just consuming the crystal matrix. It's using your ship's own energy distribution network to power its evolution. Every time you hit it with an energy weapon, it analyzes the energy signature and incorporates it into its structure. She turned to face the bewildered aliens. You've basically been force-feeding it exactly what it needs to get stronger. That is why we ceased our attempts to destroy it through energy-based means, Ixel explained. But we have found no alternative approach that. Oh, I'm not criticizing. Elle interrupted again, her eyes shining with scientific excitement behind her scratched helmet visor. This is brilliant. It's exactly the kind of adaptation we see in extreme radiation-feeding bacteria back on Earth, just taken to an entirely new level. The question isn't how to kill it, it's how to talk to it. Talk to it. Lix's crystalline form clouded completely. It is a pathogen, not a sentient being. Everything's sentient if you look at it the right way, Elle replied, already setting up what looked like a crude interface between her equipment and the ship's systems. Back on Earth, we've learned that the line between simple organism and complex intelligence is way blurrier than we once thought. Bacteria can communicate, form networks, make decisions as a group. And this little beauty. She gestured at the infected hull. It's showing signs of organization I've never seen before. It's not just surviving. It's building something. The Vextal scientists watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as Elle began to set up her equipment. Her methods seemed random, even dangerous, but there was a purpose behind her apparent chaos that they couldn't quite grasp. She moved with the confident efficiency of someone who had spent their life working with things that could kill them, and had learned to enjoy the dance. First things first, she announced, pulling out a device that hummed ominously. Let's see if we can get this party started. Who's ready to make some new friends? Looking at their partially consumed ship and the enthusiastic human who seemed far too happy about their crisis, the Vextal scientists began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. But as another section of hull succumbed to the pathogen's advance, they realized they had no choice but to trust in this strange creature from a death world who saw opportunity where they saw only destruction. Perhaps, they reflected, that was exactly why humans had survived their hostile world long enough to reach the stars. When chaos meets order, you want to do what? Senior researcher Lix's crystalline form had become so clouded with distress that they were nearly opaque. The human's latest proposal seemed to defy not just proper scientific protocol, but basic logic itself. I want to feed it, Elle repeated cheerfully, already preparing her equipment. Look at these readings. The pathogen isn't just consuming your ship's crystal matrix, it's trying to reorganize it into something new. But it's stuck in a loop, consuming energy and evolving without direction. We need to give it a push toward a more stable form. By introducing additional biomass. Ixal's harmonic tones vibrated with concern. That seems completely insane. Elle grinned behind her helmet. Sometimes the best solutions are. Think about it. Your ship's crystal matrix is basically a living computer, right? This pathogen isn't destroying it so much as trying to rewrite it, but it doesn't have the right building blocks to complete whatever program it's trying to run. She pulled out a container of what looked like shimmering black sludge. The Vextal scientists recoiled instinctively, their segments shifting in patterns of deep distress. This, Elle patted the container affectionately, is a colony of extremophile bacteria I've been working with. They're adapted to survive in environments that would kill most living things. Extreme radiation, toxic metals, you name it. More importantly, they can form complex neural networks. I think they might be just what our little friend needs. You brought additional dangerous organisms aboard our ship. Ven's voice frequencies had risen to almost painful levels. Of course, a good scientist always comes prepared. Elle was already setting up an interface between her container and the ship's infected sections. Besides, these are my babies. I've spent years working with them, understanding them. They're dangerous, sure, but they're dangerous on our terms. The gathered scientists watched in horror as Elle began her procedure. She had somehow convinced them to give her access to a small, already quarantined section of the ship's hull, where the pathogen's advance had been temporarily contained. Her methods were unlike anything they had ever seen. A bizarre combination of sophisticated analysis and what seemed like pure intuition. "Look at this," she exclaimed after several hours of work. The viewing screen showed microscopic imagery of the interaction between her introduced bacteria and the crystal-consuming pathogen. Instead of the explosive growth they had feared, something entirely unexpected was happening. The two organisms were communicating. "It's exactly what I thought," Elle said, her voice filled with excitement. "Your crystal eater isn't trying to destroy the ship. It's trying to upgrade it. It's just been missing the right translation protocols. My bacteria are acting like a biological programming language, helping it express what it's trying to build." "That's impossible," Lix protested, but their tone lacked conviction. The evidence was right in front of them. The chaotic spread of the pathogen was becoming more organized, forming patterns that almost resembled the ship's original crystal matrix, but with subtle differences. "Impossible is just another word for hasn't happened yet," Elle replied, making adjustments to her equipment. "On Earth, we learned that the hard way. When we first discovered bacteria, we thought they were just simple organisms. Then we found out they could communicate, cooperate, solve problems. Some can even share genetic information across different species to help each other adapt. Life always finds a way to surprise you." A sudden alarm blared through the ship. "The pathogen's growth rate is accelerating," Ven announced, their crystalline form vibrating with panic. No, this is good," Elle insisted, her eyes fixed on her readings. "Look at the pattern. It's not random anymore. The growth is following the ship's existing neural pathways. It's integrating." "Integration." Ixal moved closer to examine the data. "You mean, your ship isn't being destroyed?" Elle confirmed, her voice soft with wonder. "It's being enhanced. The pathogen is incorporating my bacteria's ability to process extreme energy forms directly into your ship's crystal matrix. If I'm reading this correctly, it's trying to create some kind of hybrid system, combining the best features of both organisms." The Vextal scientists watched in amazement as sections of their ship that had been corrupted by the pathogen began to stabilize. The new crystal formations were different from the originals. Darker, more complex in structure, but undeniably alive and functioning. "This is unprecedented," Ixal observed, their tones resonating with a mixture of fear and fascination. "The implications for our understanding of crystal-based technology are absolutely mind-blowing." Elle finished, already taking samples of the new formation. Your ship isn't just going to survive this. It's going to come out stronger. These new sections can process energy forms that would have overloaded the original matrix. The pathogen wasn't an attack. It was an upgrade program. We just needed to give it the right tools to complete its work. As the crisis began to transform into what might be the greatest scientific breakthrough in Vextal history, the aliens found themselves reevaluating their view of the human and her chaotic methods. Perhaps there was wisdom in her madness, a deeper understanding that came from evolving on a world where survival often meant embracing the very chaos they had always sought to eliminate. There's just one small issue we need to discuss, Elle added, her tone suddenly serious. We need to talk about what happens when these changes finish propagating through your ship's systems, because I don't think your vessel is going to be quite the same afterward. Sometimes, survival means becoming something new entirely. The Vextal scientists exchanged glances, their crystalline forms shifting in patterns of uncertainty. They had called upon chaos to save them, and now they would have to live with the consequences of that choice. The question was, were they ready for the transformation that was coming? Evolution of trust. The Luminous Inquiry's central research chamber had become something entirely new. The once transparent crystalline walls now pulsed with complex patterns of dark energy, beautiful but alien. Dr. Eleanor Blackwood stood in the middle of it all, her modified hazmat suit reflecting the strange new light as she monitored the transformation's progress. The integration is at 70%, she announced, checking her readings. The ship's neural pathways are rewiring themselves faster than I've ever seen any biological system adapt. It's beautiful. Chief Researcher Ixel moved closer to examine the changes. Their crystalline forms seemed to resonate with the new frequencies emanating from the ship's modified structure. The energy efficiency readings are beyond anything in our records, they admitted. But the level of chaos in the system isn't chaos at all, Elle interrupted gently. Look closer. What you're seeing is a whole new level of order, one that embraces complexity instead of trying to eliminate it, just like life on Earth had to do. The ship shuddered suddenly, causing the Vextal scientists to shift their segments in alarm. But Elle remained calm, even as new formations of crystal began growing around them at an accelerating rate. This is the critical phase, she explained, moving through the changing chamber with practiced ease. The ship isn't just incorporating the new biomass, it's learning from it. Every part of its structure is becoming more adaptable, more resilient, like an immune system upgrading itself. But we're losing control, senior researcher Lix protested, their usually melodic tones sharp with anxiety. The ship's responses are becoming increasingly unpredictable. Our standard protocols are useless here, Elle finished. That's the point. Sometimes you have to let go of control to achieve something greater. Trust me. I learned this lesson the hard way back on Earth. She pulled up a holographic display, showing the complex dance of energy patterns flowing through the ship's new hybrid systems. See these formations. They're similar to how bacteria on Earth form communities to solve problems. Each individual cell follows simple rules, but together they create something incredibly sophisticated. Your ship is doing the same thing, just at a much more advanced level. And you believe we should simply trust this process? Ixel asked, their tones carrying both skepticism and a hint of hope. Elle's expression softened behind her helmet visor. Let me tell you a story about trust and evolution. Back on Earth, scientists once thought our bodies were purely human. Then we discovered that we're actually walking ecosystems, trillions of bacteria living in harmony with our cells, helping us digest food, fight off diseases, even influence our moods. We had to learn to trust these invisible partners that we'd evolved with. She gestured at the transforming ship around them. What's happening here isn't so different. Your ship is forming a new kind of partnership, becoming something that combines the best of crystal technology and biological adaptation. But for it to work, you have to trust the process. Another shudder ran through the ship, stronger this time. Warning signals flashed across multiple displays as the transformation accelerated. All systems are exceeding design parameters, Venn reported, their crystalline form clouded with worry. The ship's core is approaching critical. No, Elle interrupted, her eyes fixed on her readings. Not critical, transcendent. Watch. The chamber erupted in a cascade of light as the ship's crystal matrix underwent a fundamental shift. The Vextal scientists watched in awe as their familiar technology transformed into something new. A living network of crystal and evolved bacteria, pulsing with possibilities they had never imagined. Energy efficiency up 300%. Elle announced, her voice filled with excitement. Neural processing speed increased by a factor of 10. And look at this. The hull is now self-repairing using the same principles as bacterial colony formation. Your ship isn't just surviving, it's evolving. The transformation rippled through the vessel, turning the crisis into a revolution. Where there had been rigid order, now there was adaptive harmony. The ship had become a true fusion of crystal technology and biological evolution, embodying the strengths of both. The real question, Elle continued, turning to face the still stunned scientists, is whether you're ready to evolve with it. This isn't just a change in your ship's systems, it's an opportunity to change how you think about life itself. Ixal moved to one of the transformed walls, their crystalline form resonating with its new frequencies. We have always sought perfection through control, they admitted. But perhaps true perfection lies in adaptation rather than rigid order. Exactly. Elle's enthusiasm was infectious. Think about what this means for your entire civilization. You've just discovered a whole new way of working with living systems instead of trying to control them. The possibilities are endless. As the transformation completed its course, the luminous inquiry hummed with new life and power. The ship had become something unprecedented, a hybrid of crystal technology and biological adaptation that challenged everything the Vextal thought they knew about scientific progress. There's just one more thing we need to discuss, Elle said, her tone becoming serious. These changes, they're not going to stop with just your ship. The knowledge we've gained here, the possibilities we've uncovered, they're going to change your entire society. Are you ready for that? The Vextal scientists looked at each other, their crystalline forms shifting in complex patterns of thought. They had called upon human chaos to save them. And in doing so, they had discovered a new path forward, one that promised to transform their civilization in ways they had never imagined. The question was, were they brave enough to take the first step? Legacy of the Deathworlders. 3 cycles had passed since the transformation of the luminous inquiry, and the ship's observation deck had become a gathering point for scientists from across the galaxy. Through the newly evolved crystal viewport, Dr. Eleanor Blackwood watched as another research vessel joined the growing fleet around them. They're still coming, she mused, making notes on her tablet. How many species does this make now? 27, Chief Researcher Ixal answered, their crystalline form shimmering with pride, each seeking to understand what we have achieved here. The Galactic Scientific Council has classified this as a paradigm-shifting event. Elle smiled, remembering the chaos and fear that had brought them to this moment. The transformed luminous inquiry had become more than just a ship. It was a living testament to what could happen when different approaches to science and survival came together. The latest test results are fascinating, she said, pulling up a holographic display. The hybrid crystal matrix isn't just maintaining itself anymore, it's innovating, creating new structures and functions we never programmed into it. It's exactly what we see in bacterial communities on Earth, but at a technological level. Indeed. Ixal's tone carried a new harmony they had developed since the transformation, one that balanced their natural crystalline resonance with more complex frequencies. Our understanding of living systems has been revolutionized. Many of our most basic assumptions about the nature of order and chaos have had to be reconsidered. The ship's new neural network pulsed around them, its patterns more organic than the rigid geometry of traditional Vextal design. What had once been seen as a crisis had become the catalyst for a fundamental shift in how their entire civilization approached technology and life itself. The Council of Elders has approved the establishment of the first hybrid research institute, Ixal continued. They wish for you to be its primary advisor. El raised an eyebrow. Me? The crazy human who introduced chaos into your perfectly ordered systems. Precisely because of that, Ixal's crystalline segments shifted in what El had learned was their equivalent of amusement. We have come to understand that our fear of chaos was limiting us. The true path to advancement lies not in eliminating complexity, but in learning to work with it. A notification chimed on El's tablet. More data from the ongoing experiments. The ship's hybrid systems were continuing to evolve, finding new ways to adapt and improve that neither human nor Vextal science had anticipated. It was a perfect example of what she had always believed, that life would always find ways to surprise you, if you let it. You know what's really interesting, El said, scrolling through the results. The way this whole situation has changed how other species view humans. We're not just Deathworlders anymore. We're being called adaptation specialists. Now, apparently, evolving on a planet that tried to kill us every day wasn't a disadvantage after all. It gave you a perspective that we lacked, Ixal agreed. Where we saw only threat and disorder, you saw opportunity and potential. Even now, many of our scientists struggle to understand how you could look at a ship-consuming pathogen and see possibility rather than destruction. El laughed. That's because you've spent millennia perfecting one way of doing things. Humans, we had to try everything just to survive. Every crisis was a chance to learn, every failure an opportunity to adapt. We never had the luxury of perfect order. Through the viewport, they could see the transformed hull of the luminous inquiry, its surface now a mesmerizing blend of crystal and living technology. The once rigid geometric patterns had been replaced by flowing, organic forms that were somehow more beautiful in their complexity. The latest data from the Eternal Seeker is particularly promising, Ixal noted, bringing up another holographic display. The sister ship, once thought lost to the pathogen, had been recovered and transformed using their new understanding. The hybrid systems are showing even greater efficiency than our initial transformation. Each iteration seems to improve upon the last. That's the beauty of working with living systems, El replied. They never stop evolving, never stop finding new solutions, just like humans had to do on Earth. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched more ships gather in the distance. The transformation that had begun here wouldn't stop with the Vextal. It was spreading across the galaxy, challenging centuries of established scientific thought. Species that had once looked down on humans as primitive survivors were now seeking their insight, recognizing that their crude adaptability might hold the key to the next stage of galactic evolution. You know what the best part is, El said finally, her eyes twinkling with that same excitement that had so unnerved the Vextal scientists when she first arrived. We're just getting started. Every new discovery, every adaptation, opens up more possibilities. The galaxy's finally ready to embrace a little chaos. Ixal's crystalline form resonated with new frequencies, ones that would have been impossible before their transformation. Perhaps that is the true legacy of the Deathworlders, they observed. Not merely surviving chaos, but teaching the rest of us how to dance with it. El smiled, watching as another research vessel approached, its crew eager to learn from what they had achieved here. The crisis that had brought her to this ship had done more than save a civilization. It had opened up new paths of evolution and discovery that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of life itself. And somewhere out there, she knew, new challenges were waiting. New problems that would require them to adapt, to evolve, to find solutions that no one had imagined possible. That was the real gift that Earth had given humanity, not just the ability to survive, but the courage to embrace the unknown and find beauty in the chaos. The legacy of the Deathworlders wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about showing the galaxy that true advancement came not from controlling life, but from learning to dance with its endless possibilities.